Welcome everybody. I'm proud to have all of you join us today for PACE's webinar on how to leverage AI to increase profitability, profits, and productivity. We are honored today to have two folks who know a lot about this subject, Larry Maisel, who's president of Decision View, and Robert Zwerling, who's founder of Aura Predictions. Webinar is being recorded, and it'll be about 35 minutes long, after which we will have time for questions and answers. So if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen as we go along, and we'll be able to answer that. So without further ado, Larry and Robert, please proceed.
Thank you, Rob. Right. And Robert, why don't you advance the slide and let's get going.
So I guess I'll start to introduce myself. Normally when you introduce yourself, you think, I have X number of years of experience. You get to a certain number of years and you say, I'm just not going to say that anymore. So I've got enough years of experience, and please believe me when I say that, and I won't remind me how many I have. But my experience has been founding and growing companies across manufacturing, software companies across manufacturing, distribution, telecommunication, high data availability, and now AI and analytics. I've done some 1,000 projects, analytics projects, and I've written numerous papers and articles on analytics, along with Larry. I've been keynote speaker and lecturer globally, written a couple of books, and you can see them here. I wrote Implementing an Analytics Culture for Data-Driven Decisions, along with my co-author, Jesper Sorensen. And then Larry and Jesper and I wrote our latest book called AI-Enabled Analytics for Business, published by Wiley. Please do go out, buy it. Makes great presents for your wife, your family, your business. So it also helps our bank account. So thank you very much if you do that. Currently, I'm founder, managing director of Aurora Predictions, and we have AI-enabled analytics software. It's called Lights, and it's a premier forecasting and planning platform for business users. It's across sales, finance, and supply chain. It's intuitive and needs no IT support or programming or statistical skills. I have a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering and a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering, where I've majored in thermodynamics and fluid mechanics. And the only reason that's important is because when we talk about AI-enabled analytics today, that background has been keenly helpful in developing the mathematical and the high advanced AI algorithms that are in our application. I am, though, a licensed professional engineer, mechanical engineering in the state of California. So with that, I'll turn it over to Larry.
Thank you, Robert. Just to give you a sense of my background, I, like Robert, do not mention the number of years, but I have had a very diverse career across many different industries with a variety of responsibilities, not least of which being a chief operating officer, a CFO, and an EVP of financial planning and analysis, FP&A. About maybe a dozen years ago, I really became very interested in the topic of analytics. And as you can see, and as Robert mentioned, in the recent past, Robert wrote the book with Robert and Jesper. And prior to that, authored a book with a member of PACE. One of the originators was Gary Kokins. So had a really terrific relationship and have spent a number of years assisting clients in the area of analytics. In addition to that, spent time as in teaching at Columbia Graduate Business School, teaching the strategy and performance management course. I've recently joined the Association of Financial Professionals, AFP's FP&A Advisory Council. Boy, that's a lot of initials. And as Robert said, we co-authored a book, and not least of which, the early part of my career was a senior partner at KPMG running the performance and strategy practice. If we go to the next slide, we'll get into some of the meat of what we want. So the topic today is how does decision-making optimize profits? Well, there's an amazing survey result, and I keep showing it because it just drops my jaw every time I look at it and share it with audiences like yourselves. 18% of business leaders, decision makers, really don't think the data is oriented to making decisions. Wow, that's 18% believe that the data management reports is decision ready. So the inverse, 82% don't believe it's ready. And then when you look at the finance leaders, it's consistently the same. And we're not just only talking about internal management reports, we're talking about business intelligence tools. Robert, if you advance the slide, please. So what's the key here? One, and I like to share with you that survivability is quite perishable. Only 52 companies out of the Fortune 500 from 70 years ago still exist. Wow. The implication is that there's a high level of uncertainty with decisions that are being made. I mean, they're being made, but there's a high level of uncertainty. And so it's almost a little bit like trial and error. If we do this, maybe this will happen. And the last point is that it's unbiased. Insights is missing. And managers are using gut feel, intuition, experience. Those are valuable guidance, guardrails, if you will, to decision-making, but it's still biased. And in the work that, and in our book, we write about the impact of bias on decision-making, drawing an awful lot from the work that Kahneman and Tversky did. And they won the Nobel Prize in 2003 on organizational behavior, economic impacts on decision-making. And it's wonderful to read their work, particularly. And there's a particular more recent book that Kahneman wrote, which is called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. And so I would encourage you to take a look at that book about bias in decision-making. So what is driving, next slide, please. So what is driving analytic importance? Well, IBM Institute of Business Value, as you can see, the leaders are telling us, right? They're not getting decision-ready data. 82% feel the information they're getting is not ready for decision-making. And then we're asking them the other side of that same important question is, what are you using, or what is going to be driving? And 75% of the business leaders say we want analytics to drive increased revenues. We want to be able to increase the speed and accuracy of decisions. Why is that important? Because in today's world, in today's almost globally connected world, things move at the speed of the internet. We're no longer waiting for things to happen. We need to make decisions quickly and react to our markets or take advantage of opportunities. And last, we want to generate new ideas, something that's innovative, whether that be in our products, whether that be in our approach to new markets. But that's critically important to do that. What's interesting in that same study is only 25% said the primary value of analytics was to contain costs or cost cutting. Well, let's go to the next slide, because I got to tell you something. If you want to optimize profits, you can't cost cut your way to profitability. These two charts are pretty indicative of what is going on over time. And I've seen other surveys and studies that have a very similar message. Cost reduction initiatives have a shelf life about the length of a good watermelon, if you will. It's fleeting. And so there must be a better way to do that. Advanced slide, please. All right? So old school approaches don't work anymore. What we want is to use predictive trends. Let's understand where the opportunities are going to reside. And analytics can reveal the impact and likelihood and risk associated with that. And a little bit later on, in the next 15 minutes or less, I'm going to share with you an innovative approach to this, which is called the Analytics Scorecard. But let's just set up why that's important. Next is that correlation reveals the true cause and effect relationships. If you really want to improve your ability to serve your customer, your markets, the people your team members in the organization, correlation becomes a very important mathematical tool. Everyone says, well, is that new? Is that AI, artificial intelligence? Well, Robert and I kind of chuckle when we hear that, is because these mathematical formulas have been around forever, even beyond Robert and my careers. I mean, I remember in undergraduate school, as looking at statistics and cause and effect and correlation. So it's been there. It's proven. It's math. It's science. And if you do it right, and we'll show you how you do it right in the Analytics Scorecard, it becomes a very valuable technique to optimize profitability. And so that's why we think the Analytics Scorecard is a real game changer for everyone. Next slide, please. So what we like to say is you can only manage what you can measure. Old adage, but it's still true. And the Analytics Scorecard, forget the three-letter acronym, ASC, Analytics Scorecard, ensures that the KPIs, your key performance indicators, and metrics are aligned with strategy and strategic objectives. And we'll show you how we do that in a moment. Next. By using the Analytics Scorecard, the analytics validates the true relationship between the KPI and unbiased data. Next. What we like, and we've done this at a number of clients, Robert and I, the Analytics Scorecard helps to measure team performance. It helps you see progress. Are you moving towards the strategic objective? So if you look at it on a periodic basis, question, Larry, how frequently is it? Well, we've done it and as frequently as weekly, monthly, or quarterly. What distinguishes which period you want? It has to do with, one, your capability and your tool set, your system's capability, the data that's coming in. But the most important thing is, what actions are you going to take? If it's a weekly report and it's more strategic, it's something you watch. If you put it on surveillance. But if it's a quarterly or monthly, you may want to take corrective action. So the frequency of looking at the data really is dependent on what decisions you want to make as you're trying to optimize profitability. Next, please. And it also allows the leadership, your leadership team, to define success for everyone and be a good tool to communicate to your employees so there's a coherent behaviors in decision making. How often do you see something being done in one area that seems to be totally disconnected from another area of the organization? Next slide, please. So as promised, Robert and I and Jesper, we said, the balanced scorecard, and I think many of you are familiar with it. It's a nice tool. It's a good tool. It was developed, quite honestly, over 30 years ago. And I have a smile on my face because I was part of the group that actually developed it. And it served its purpose. It helped to lay down a strategy, what you needed to measure to see how well you are executing that strategy. But one of the, let's call it, flaws at the time was the relationship between the measure and the strategic objective, which is the circles on the left, and your KPI, in this case, customer churn for the company, this fictitious company that we created. So how do I know that there's a true cause and effect relationship? It's anecdotal. It's assumptive. We would go out and ask people, and they would say, hey, I've been in this business for 25 years, and this is how it operates. Even if the market has changed, even if the relationships have changed. And the work that Kahneman did demonstrates how biased perspectives, biased decision-making is inherently flawed. If we go to the next one, we show the full scorecard. Let me explain each of the columns first, and then I'll go into some of the detail. One, we like to identify and validate the relationship between the measure and the KPI. Does it impact it? And can we validate that? The next column, strength and direction, is how impactful is that relationship? Is that cause and effect relationship? And what direction does it move? And I'll explain that in a moment. The next column is what we call threshold. Where does it impact it? How much do we have to improve to move the needle, to change the dial? And then the last column is the impact. What is the outcome of the improvement effort that you could expect and look to? And that has a significant impact on your resource allocation decisions. Where do I improve? And how much will that improvement get me in terms of my KPI, in this case, customer churn? And customer churn is a direct causal impact on revenue growth or revenue decrease. Let's go through a couple of quick examples. Price discounts. but we marked it in red because what we found is that price discounts are not correlated. Okay, so what? So what? If I'm going to compete and I'm going to match price discounts to reduce my churn of my customers in this hypothetical case, I am literally giving money away without any benefit. And so what the scorecard does is it tells us price discount is not the important metric to improve customer churn. We go to the next example, recent store visits. Well, recent store visits does have a correlation, a correlation effect, the strength, but it's kind of low and direct. And quite frankly, in the threshold, it's got to be greater than 3 visits in the last 12 months, LTM, last 12 months. Well, the store might not be that close. So the next one is the metric is customer satisfaction rating. Wow, we found it is definitely correlated, so that as we improve customer satisfaction, churn will be reduced. So there's a high relationship, strength and direction, high customer sat, inverse is reduction of customer churn. But where does that impact? What's the threshold? When is that going to occur? And what we've found is it had to be over 80%. So if your customer satisfaction was 82%, it would have an impact on customer churn. It would reduce churn. But if your customer sat ratings came in at 70, 75, what we're finding is it doesn't have that impact. So it's not just the correlation, it's where the impact and or what we call the threshold occurs. And if you just look at the strategy map on the left, as we improve customer sat, one of the things in the circles, which is a cause and effect in our process, is if we reduce billing errors, that should have, and we can measure, reduces complaints, which will increase customer satisfaction, which will therefore reduce customer churn. So a very powerful tool. And now I'd like to turn to Robert, who will share with you several very impactful and significant use cases of where we applied these analytical techniques. Robert, to you.
Thank you, Larry. So what I'm going to share with you, these are the 2 cases. These are real, large company. This one, very large company, where we did the analytics scorecard. And this is just one sliver of the scorecard. And I'll walk you through it. We first have the column here of the KPI. And the KPI is customer growth dynamics. And the measure, in this case, we're looking at the quantity of products we sell. So total quantity, QTY, is the quantity, the number of products that were sold. You can see there's 530,466 products sold in the particular year was fiscal 22, which was a 26% year-over-year improvement. Very good. And this next section here is our test and validate. Okay. So one of the things we wanted to test was how well these the quantity, if we sell more, what's its relationship to revenue? And you would expect, instinctively, intuitively, anecdotally, gut feel, any unbiased parameter that you want, that the more you sell, the more money you're going to make. And that is true. There is a correlation between selling more product, more quantity, and increasing revenue. Here's the but. the coefficient of correlation is 0.882. And for those of you that don't remember your college statistic, correlations range from -1 to +1. When it's a 1, it means it's a direct correlation. It's perfect. For every 1 point you go up in, let's say, the quantity, you go up a point in revenue. Now notice here that the coefficient of correlation is 0.882. Now that's a good, strong correlation. I wouldn't call it strong, I should say it's a very good correlation. But it's not strong, it's not very strong, and it's not perfect. In other words, we would expect a coefficient of correlation over 0.9 approaching 1. If we got a coefficient of correlation of 0.95, 0.98, 0.99, in other words, almost perfect, that's something we would expect. We wouldn't expect a good correlation. We would expect a strong correlation. So what this told us is that there was something in our pricing or our product portfolio or a region that was breaking the strength of the correlation. And as we go dive into the data, we can actually find what business drivers were weak and causing the weakening of the correlation between the quantity and the revenue. So number one, this is the first very important thing. What's our business driver? And we may think we know what our business driver is: sell more. In this case, sell more does do a job to increase revenue, but not the whiz-bang thing that we thought it was or should be, which caused further explanation. The next thing we do is what we do is called a probabilistic forecast. We actually use AI to make a forecast, and then we run a Monte Carlo simulation to understand the probability about the forecast. So the central line here that you could see, the central purple line or whatever color it is, that's the forecast. And each of the bands around it are confidence intervals. So the yellow band is the first confidence interval. That's your 68% confidence that the future will fall in this range. And then your orange band is your 95% confidence that the future will fall in this range. And the red band is your 99% confidence the future will fall in this range. So we now have a view to the future and the probability, a bell curve outcome of what it can be. In other words, most people say, well, it's going to be $100 plus or minus $10. Well, no, it's $100, plus or minus $10. That may be in the first confidence interval. It may be $100 plus or minus $20 in a second confidence interval. But whether you choose $10 or $20, that's the beauty of the Monte Carlo simulation. It's telling you what the quantitative value is and what the probability of outcome is. So with this test and validate completed, we go to strength and direction. And here we employ another piece of AI called the predictive signal. Now, the predictive signal tells us something about the future of the trend. And in this case, the predictive signal is positive, that we have a green up arrow here, and it has a value of 1.2. Now, I'm not going to get into the values. I'm not going to get wonky on you. But the next column that Larry was talking about earlier, the threshold, it says, what does our threshold need to be, in this case, to achieve our strategic objective of we want 2x revenue growth in 3 years? Well, for that, the predictive signal threshold needs to be greater than or equal to 2, and currently we're at 1.24. And the impact would be, if we were at 2, our forecast here that we would have generated would have gone up to 764,000 units sold versus 609,000 units sold, which means in the next fiscal year, we would have been 25%, our forecast would have been 25% higher had our predictive signal been stronger. And again, what we do here with the scorecard is we drill down to find where we have weakness in the predictive signal. Is it in a particular product? Is it in a particular region? Is it with a particular sales group? So these are the things that the analytics scorecard can reveal to us. They can tell us, first of all, we say what's important to us. Our objective is to grow our business. Our objective is to grow our business 2x in the next 3 years. Okay, what do we think is going to get there? Assumptively, we think we sell more. And the answer is, analytically, yes. But you have some things broken in your sales processes or your product portfolio or particular regions, which is causing weakness in that assumptive relation. Well, how far can we go? Well, if we had a particular strength of our AI predictive signal, we could increase our business by up to 764,000 units. But our predictive signal isn't that strong. Oh, well, where is it not that strong? So you can see how this analytical scorecard takes your strategic objectives, your goals, and your assumptions and brings unbiased analytic clarity to what you have to do, when you have to do it, what investments you have to make, and where you have to make them. Let's move on. The next very important part of analytics, and this is the first and highest and best use case of artificial intelligence, is forecasting. And you would think everyone by now has crossed the chasm, and every business and every company would be doing AI forecasting today. If you thought that, that would be wrong. According to the Finance Analytics Institute, only 10%, only the top 10% of companies that they surveyed in their annual survey of temperature of finance, only the top 10 companies are actually doing analytics, AI-enabled analytics. 50% are still just in spreadsheets. And even the top quartile, about the best they do is some dashboarding, data visualization and dashboarding, which is not analytics. Most people conflate dashboards with analytics. Dashboards are a visualization of history. They are not the application of mathematics and statistics on data, right? When we talk about analytics, we're talking about the things that Larry was referring to, which we all learned back in college, all our mathematics back then. So this is an example of a $750 million consumer packaged good manufacturer who ran a benchmark between state-of-the-art demand planning software and AI-enabled software for forecasting. And what you see, these maroon bars, are a measure of the forecast accuracy, in this case for a particular customer, for each particular month, January through December, for the forecast that was actually done a year in advance. So all these values, these bars here, these forecasts, the forecast for each month was done at the beginning of the prior year. So we have a 12-month forecast done 12 months in advance, and we can see that the average, not the average, but the accuracy month to month to month ranged somewhere from a low of 90% to a high of 99%. And we did this using the Lights software, And I said, made a year in advance. And the average forecast accuracy is seen in this maroon line, horizontal line up here. And that line shows a 95% average forecast accuracy. And the accuracy was in terms of there were actually two measures, units and dollars. The measure we're showing here, because we were focused on inventory, was on units. So we had 95% accuracy on average across the year for the forecast of units sold to the manufacturer. Now, the black horizontal line you see here, this is the customer's target. In other words, the customer said, I want to be 80% accurate each month for the year in my forecast. Now, the next thing I want to show you is the benchmark of the customer's demand plan software. This is state-of-the-art demand plan software that many, many, many companies have today. And you can see that the blue bars have an accuracy ranging from a low of about 49% to a high of about 78%, with an average accuracy here in this blue horizontal line of about 65%. Now, the difference between having 65% accuracy throughout the year and 95% accuracy throughout the year translates, as you can see down here, to a $90 million reduction in inventory. In other words, had they applied AI forecasting for the year, they could have had $90 million less inventory on hand and still maintain customer SLA, customer satisfaction and customer SLA, and delivered the product for their customers' needs. Now, as I mentioned before, you think that with all this and with all the stuff that goes on today and all that's available today, every business would have this. You know, we would have done it. We had the early adopters. We crossed the chasm. We're off and on into the great yonder, and everyone is doing it. If you thought that, as I mentioned before, you'd be wrong. And Larry, I'll leave it to you to put an exclamation mark on this.
Great, thank you, Robert, and very, very powerful, and as we know. So a little cartoon here, and the bottom says, "I don't have time to see any crazy salesman. Can't you see I got a battle to fight?" And what we say is that analytics, advanced analytics, is the most powerful thing you can do this year. So the pushback of organizations that we don't have time, we don't have the resource, we don't have this, we don't have that. What's so compelling that of what Robert shared and what I shared in terms of the actionable outcomes that you can take as a result of the analytics scorecard, you can't afford not to do it. And yet a lot of companies, as Robert said, they're not doing it. And some of those that are doing it are failing. And so there's a need very much in the business world to do it and to do it right. So let's summarize. If we go to the next chart, we'll summarize. And here are what I call the key takeaways. Again, reporting spending time on the past needs to be forward-looking and business-specific. I think we've made the case for that as it relates to optimizing profitability. If you're going to do analytics, you have to define its business purpose, know the measures, have the right analytics, determine the interpretation, and most importantly, and I cannot emphasize this enough, have the organization structured, culturally aware and aligned to be taking action. It is one thing to be aware. It is most important to implement and act on that. Next. Again, we can run multiple scenarios, as Robert showed, at different levels of probability. Remember those yellow, orange, and red lines in the Monte Carlo chart? they go back to what the likelihood is of that, and we can understand which set level of probability we're willing to risk and take. And then next slide is, and just keep going to the next one, to the last bullet. Reporting and analytics, it's about insight, impact, and drives economic value. And the analytics scorecard is the tool, is the capability to set the path to more insightful and impactful decisions. There's a QR code here on the right. If you're interested in the book, we wanted to make it easy to access it. And if you just use the QR code, it should launch you to the book itself. We do have a few minutes, and since I'm on the line, I'll take the Q&A, and then any of the questions should come through the chat room. If you have any, I've opened up the chat room. Any questions?
Okay, I'll be posing the questions I see in the Q&A. And the first one is, what has been a major lesson learned implementing these methods?
Robert, do you want to start, since I've been on the lessons learned, and I'll fill in the addition. Sure.
Number one, and actually we wrote about this in the book, and the reason the book is also very important to get is we spend more time in the book talking about failures than successes. And the biggest cause of failure is at the executive level, and it's three things: budget, bandwidth, and focus, right? Many executives say, well, I don't want to spend any money on tools. That's an expense. Analytic tools really aren't any more expensive than your Tableau or your Power BI or things like that. There's this aversion to cost, or they say, well, why don't we just do it in Excel? So budget for tools and people training. We have to go from Excel jockeys to consulting analysts. In other words, Excel jockeys are clever. They want to build reports, but consulting analysts are curious and they want to understand the insights in the data. So budget for tools and people training, bandwidth. In other words, their people already have a full plate, if you will, and you've got to be able to say, you got to take something off their plate so they have the time to spend on implementing analytics. And focus. Once you've given them the budget, once you've given them the bandwidth, you got to let them stay on the project. You can't pull them off the project and say, well, now do this, and we're now going to do this, or we're now going to do this. It doesn't work. So budget, bandwidth, focus are the central elements that the executives have to provide for a successful analytics project. And Larry, I'll let you take the next step.
Yeah, no, excellent, Robert. And just to put an extra in the workshop that we're looking to share with everyone, is we'll actually go through an implementation roadmap. What is the playbook to get there? But as Robert said, the most important thing is the three: budget, bandwidth, and focus. Any other question, Ray?
Yep. Now we got a whole bunch of questions here. Sure. So there's a comment that I think will resonate with many of us on this call, and that is the following. I tried to automate this myself many years ago in telecoms, but the quality of the data was not good enough. Even today in 2024, this has not changed much.
We hear that a lot. And I think that is it is what we consider to be a false premise. What is the false premise? That our data is not as high quality as it needs to be, as opposed to we don't have the data. But if you have the data and you think there's a quality issue, one, you should be fixing that. And from a control point of view, here's my old CFO hat speaking. But from an analytics point of view, what we can do, and we did this in a recent client, we ingested loads and loads of rows and of data and columns from spreadsheets that the client provided. And when we ran the analytics, we could pinpoint where some of the data was questionable because there were anomalies to it. And so the answer, Rafe, to the question, and it's a good question, is if I have poor data or I suspect my data, can I still do this? The answer is you cannot afford not to do it because it will help cleanse the data, show you where you need to improve it, and be able to make important decisions. Remember that first chart? Is the information 18% of business leaders felt that the information they're getting was not decision ready? Well, this will help improve that statistic. And finance will help improve your performance of what value you're adding to the organization.
Let me dovetail on that too, because there was a problem years ago, not only in data availability, data quality, but systems as well. Today, modern analytic tools have ways of scrubbing data, isolating data with integrity violations, and that may be askew. So it's much better today. And as I said earlier, I've done over 1,000 of these projects. There's never been a project where that stopped us because data was bad. We could always do the project with the data that we have. Now, to dovetail on what Larry was saying, is that the beauty of doing this in analytics and the beauty of using analytics is the more you use data, the more you find bad data, and it's a self-cleaning mechanism. So you use it, you find it, you fix it. And the more you use it, the more you find it, the more you fix it. So data today will not stop you from doing an analytics project because the tools are better, the data is better today than it was 10, 20 years ago. And the faults that are in the data today can be found and can be isolated and can be fixed.
Okay, well, thanks for that answer. Next, with regard to analytics, you mentioned using Monte Carlo simulation. What other methods do you use? For example, machine learning? And then what are your thoughts on how business managers can be best trained to use these analytical tools?
Yeah, well, let me take that. So absolutely, there's Monte Carlo. Then there's now machine learning is at the heart of it, uses algorithms, mathematical algorithms, statistical algorithms. So there are things called like decision. There's two major classifications, classified and unclassified, in machine learning. And again, we write about this in the book AI-Enabled Analytics. A short primer on AI and analytics and what you can use and when you can use it. And there's a variety of things. So within machine learning, there's a whole raft of mathematical capabilities. Like in forecasting, you have your ARIMA, a very popular one, very powerful one, Holt-Winters, which is a kind of a derivative of ARIMA. Of course, your regression, exponential smoothing, linear regression. These are all techniques, mathematics that are used in the ML algorithms and many, many more. There are, depending on the tool that you use, some require higher degrees of programming capability for the tool, for example, like R or Python, and some much less. Others require higher degrees of mathematical capabilities, and some much less. So depending on the tool you select, it will tell you what kind of skill set you need. But the most important skill set to have is what I mentioned earlier. We call that the difference between being clever and being curious. The clever man wants to deliver something, right? With whatever tool he has, he takes a tool and he delivers an output. The curious man says, what insight are you looking for from the data? And what insight is in the data? So when it comes to implementing analytics, you're going to be driven by your tool and your people. And the people that you select must be curious. Larry, I'll let you dovetail on that.
So, Rafe, I want to turn it back to you and to Toby. If Gary Koken's still on the line. Gary, I want you to know with you're a valued contributor to what we've been developing. So, Rafe,
Can you hear me? Am I muted?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
All right. Thanks, Larry. And I'm the one that asked the question that Rafe read, what's the major lesson learned? So just want to let you know, I was curious.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up here then. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a very interesting presentation, and it's certainly an important topic. Please check our website and LinkedIn for future PACE webinars. We have a great lineup for next month, and be sure to catch them.